morning. I'm very happy to be here. Lots of friends in the crowd, so magandang umaga sa mga Pilipino na nandito, and good morning to all of our friends who have come from all over Asia. I'm Bam, and I was in batch 0 of Asia 21. That's 2005, okay? No, 2006. 2006, batch 0 and batch 1. So we were the test case 19 years ago, long time ago. And some of the people who were part of that batch are still my friends today. We still keep in touch, actually. We crisscross conferences, seminars, and different activities all throughout those years. And of course, for those who came after in batch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think I was active all the way maybe until batch 10, no? And for many of those in those first few batches, I also kept in touch. And many of them worked with me in the different careers that I've had through the years. So my first time to be part of Asia 21, I was heading the National Youth Commission in the Philippines. That was my first time in government. And I was a really young, 26 years old, I think, at that time. I'm 48 now, by the way. So that's a long time ago. And from there, I went into social enterprise. I met a number of friends here like Cherry. And in my social enterprise life, when I left government, a number of my friends also entered Asia 21. And then in 2013, I ran and won in the Senate, in the Philippine Senate, for the first time. That was way back in 2013. And for me, and for many of us here who are in different parts of our career, it's pretty clear that you can actually have different careers and still be of service. You can be in government, out of government, in social enterprise, in private enterprise. You can be a doctor like Brian here, or also be a disaster relief expert. You can head the COVID response of a whole province like Brian, but also he's now in the private sector as a doctor. You can go in and out. I was part of media before. I'm out of media now. And every area that you're part of, there's really an opportunity to serve. Ken here was in government, now he's out of government. As the years go on, you'll find yourselves in different careers. And honestly, I think many of us will have maybe 3 or 4 different areas where we'll be. But as long as you're clear with what you want to do, with who you are, and you keep good relationship with the people that you meet, I think you'll eventually find yourself in the right place. In my case, joining government in 2013, that was a different time in our country. No? My cousin was actually the president at that time, and I was 7 years in social enterprise. I ran a program that worked with microfinance institutions and who worked with small sari-sari store owners. These are very, very small stores all over the country. Indonesia has them, Africa has them. I think all of our countries probably have them. And what we found at that time was that all of these small stores put together, their sales would actually outsell the biggest retailer in the Philippines. But they were so small, and they were subject to a lot of predatory practices, and they had the lowest prices when it came to dealing with manufacturers. So we brought them together under one program, and we collectively bargained with all of these huge companies. And that was my work for about 6 or 7 years. And around that time, I found something really interesting, which was that if given the right opportunity, and if given the right chance, even the simplest business in the Philippines had a chance to do well for their family. If the most of these stores are run by women, by the way, so we also received a number of recognition for working in that space. If given the chance, these Filipino mothers could put their kids to school, could actually create a comfortable life for themselves with the right support and with the right programs. So that was my work for a number of years. But then there was an opportunity to run, because at that time, many of us in the social enterprise side, I think some of us still feel this way. We're doing so many things, but government doesn't seem to understand what we're doing. So that was my drive back then. maybe some of these programs that we're doing from the non-government side, from the non-profit side, could actually get to government if somebody from this side crossed over. And there was an opportunity because at that time, my cousin was the president and they had a senatorial slate and there wasn't a youth candidate. I was 35 years old at that time. To be a senator, you need to be 35. So I was right there at the age limit. And I won in 2013. By 2016, the Philippine politics took a different turn, no? Because at that time, after President Aquino, it was President Duterte. And I found myself in the opposition. So I was in the administration pushing for programs for inclusive growth. We passed a number of important laws. But by the second half of my term in the Senate, I find myself in the opposition, and it was a very different time in our country. During that time, I was actually charged with sedition. I was called a terrorist at some point. The Filipinos here are laughing, no? But it was pretty serious back then. It was a very different time. And in 2019, I ran for re-election and I lost. No? Simply put, it was really difficult to go up against the administration at that time in our history. This is 2019. I had the highest votes in the opposition. I honestly thought I would win. Our polling was good. We did everything we felt that we needed to do to actually make it. But in the end, I fell short by 0.2%. So in the Philippine Senate, there are 24 senators. Our mandate is national. We're not regional or by state. So we actually run everywhere. All the 7,107 islands vote for us. So in the Philippines, the president, the vice president, and the senators all have a national mandate. And at that time, and every election cycle, there are 12 winners for the Senate. I was number 14. So I lost in 2019. And at that time, when you don't expect to lose, it comes as a little bit of a shock, no? And I know that many here are achievers, you've all have your awards, and you've all done really well. But there will come a time, and sometimes it can be a blessing, I'll tell you why later, that you don't make it. And sometimes the Lord, the universe, basically says, do something else in the meantime. And in 2019, when I lost, we felt we had to put up a fight, no? Because if I didn't run, no incumbent from the opposition would have run. And basically that meant complete and utter surrender to the administration. So that fight, I felt, even though it was uphill and very difficult, had to be fought. So during that time, after I lost, I was a private citizen, and within a few months, we were hit with the pandemic. And during the pandemic, there was a fog of war. People didn't really know what was going to happen. But in one Viber group of Asia Society, we had Dr. Brian Lim there. And Dr. Brian Lim is one of our best infectious disease doctors. He was batch, I'm not sure, what year were you Asia Society, Brian? 2011, no? We're good friends. He actually used to help me out with my health-related bills in the Senate. And while there was so much confusion, and even before the lockdown, which was March 2020 in the Philippines, Dr. Brian was telling us about this disease that was killing people in his home province, and people very close to him as well. And he was saying, the doctors here are using garbage bags for our PPEs. And that spurred a few of us from that group to put together an initiative that eventually would raise over $1 million, and that served a lot of hospitals with PPEs and with masks. And in many hospitals, that NGO that I was a part of was actually ahead of government in providing these materials. 2019, 2020, comes 2022, it was time for another presidential election. And at that time, again, the administration was all-powerful. This is the Duterte administration. And nobody was really coming out, no, to really challenge that. And by 2021, I decided not to run again. And people were a little bit surprised that I chose not to run again. And instead, I supported the vice president at that time, which was Vice President Robredo, and I was her campaign manager. It was an interesting fight. because coming from the Duterte time and coming from the pandemic, people expected, a very, very lopsided battle. In the end, the numbers showed that it was actually very much for the administration. But during that 6 to 7 months of the campaign, we found a lot of people coming out. And it was an interesting time because people here in the Philippines said that a number of Filipinos found their voice again, to come out, to speak out, and just to participate, simply to participate. At that time, the Vice President, who was Leni Robredo, was the head of the opposition, and we supported her to run. She eventually ended up at second place to the current president. But when she filed, we felt our numbers actually saw that she could hit about a third of the country. She could get votes up to a third of the country. But after filing, we had the Marcoses and the Dutertes coming together, forming the so-called Unity Team. And once they formed together, the 25% on one side and the 25% on the other side reached 50%, and it was very difficult to overcome. But in the end, our candidate hit about a third of the country. Of course, President Marcos hit over 50% of the country, and we lost again. It's interesting, after 2 consecutive losses, a lot of Filipinos, especially those from our side of the political fence, were ready to give up. And many said, that's it, game over. Having seen an election with no president, by the way, in our history has hit over 50%. And having hit over 50%, many people said maybe it's time to pack it away and just accept that the times have changed. But what was interesting at that time was that even though we lost, a number of young people came out. A lot of young people came out. And we were able to fill up the thoroughfares of our CBD. Practically every province that we went to was filled up with so many young people. Unfortunately, many of these young people were not registered and they couldn't really vote, but they filled up these rallies. So come 2025, which is this year, for Filipinos, it seems like a lifetime ago. We actually had the elections this year. And last year, when I came back from my fellowship at Yale, I decided I would give it one more shot. Now, what was key to our campaign was that the unity team of the Marcoses and the Dutertes was no longer there. There was already fracture in that unified front, and the former unity team are now actually in the middle of a big conflict in our country. So because of that conflict, and for the politicians here, they know what I'm talking about, when there's conflict in the major party, all of these smaller parties suddenly have a chance. And I decided to go for it again in 2025. So that's why some people say I'm the comeback kid here because I haven't been back to the Senate for 6 years. In the Philippines, that's really a lifetime. I remember one of my uncles telling me, after the 2019 loss, he said, Iho, I like you better this way. I said, what do you mean, Tito? Tito is uncle. No? What do you mean, Tito? He said, I like you better this way because now you have battle scars. And I like you better with battle scars. And for many of us here who are in and out of government, who have changed careers, who have gone through different things, in the end, that winning streak is going to end. And you will find yourself at the losing end of a battle. But guess what? After that, everything seems to be better. Because one, you know that you can survive it. And two, those battle scars, they're the best teachers for you. They teach you. And if you hold on to that and learn from it, you can grow from it. I'm 48 now. When I entered Asia Society, I was in my 20s. I thought I knew everything when I was 27. Ken? Okay? Right? When you were young, right? But at 48, I'm humbler now. I know that I don't know everything now. And that all of these missteps will actually lead you somewhere. So all of the missteps in 2019, the missteps in 2022, it led to the 2025 election. I can honestly say we learned from all of the past electoral contests, and we did a little bit of a new strategy for 2025. So going into 2025, in May of 2024, I was up for a survey. And again, there are 12 winners in the Philippine elections. My number was 24. Okay? And a lot of my friends said, you must be crazy for trying to run again. And here in the Philippines, what do you call this? You file for candidacy in October, and you run in May. So from October to May, that's a grueling 9 months of your life where you're practically campaigning already, and you're spending and you're campaigning and everything. So when I filed in October, I think I was 18. You know, Doris knows this, no? I was 18. And admittedly, I think some of the people here who are my friends also thought I was crazy. I don't know if Ching believed in me. Did you believe in me, Ching? Of course. I'm not sure if she did. I'm not sure if she did, no? But definitely there were some people who thought I was crazy for running again. 24, a year before the elections. And I remember one of our good friends, Mark Yu, who is also an Asia Society member, an Asia 21 member. Mark Yu has always been helping me in all of my campaigns. He said, you know what? What's the worst that could happen? You've lost already. You've lost already, you survived, you're fine, your family's fine. What's the worst that could happen? And when I filed in October, we were considered a long shot, right? In fact, the traditional surveys only had me in the top 12 probably in the last 2 weeks of the campaign in April. But what we saw was that a lot of young people, again, the same young people who were in those huge rallies in 2022, they were now registered. And there were an additional 6 million new young people who are registered. By the way, whose advocacy is it to have young people registered? That's Ching and Youth Vote Philippines. She's been doing that for over 10 years, close to 20 years. Finally, young people listened and they registered after 20 years. And there were over 6 million new registrants for the 2025 elections. And I ran with a good friend, one of my mentors, Senator Pangilinan. We were both 12 to 18, like going into the last month. I ended up at number 2 and he ends up at number 5 with over almost 21 million votes. It was such a huge surprise that even until today, people are still saying, I can't believe you won with 21. I think when I saw Doris the other night, that's what she told me, right? I can't believe you won with 21 million votes. It was so funny that on the night of the election, one of our supporters called up my chief of staff. And I'll say this in English, but of course it was in Tagalog, no? He said, I can't believe. So the person I ran with is Kiko Pangilinan, Francis Pangilinan. He said, I can't believe Kiko and Bam didn't make it. Of course, by 10 p.m. of election day, you know the results already. So this supporter said, I can't believe that they didn't make it. Nakakahiya. It's embarrassing. The Filipino people don't know how to vote for good senators. And then my chief of staff says, what are you saying? They won. And he said, no, I'm looking at number 6 to 12 and they're not there. Nobody believed we would be in the top. You know, nobody really believed it. The Filipinos here know what I'm talking about. They know that nobody believed it, but we ended up there. So those battle scars, they paid off. They paid off. What were the differences for 2025? The big difference for 2025 is that we ran a campaign for all Filipinos, where we wanted to make sure all Filipinos were welcome. Our country, up to that point and even up to today, is very divided, very, very polarized. Areas, huge differences, north and south, or, huge differences in our country. But we ran a campaign that was a campaign for everybody. And we ran a campaign that was focused on education. So one of the laws that I passed before I left the Senate in my first term was the free college law that made all of our state universities free. And when I ran in 2019, the law was just a law for maybe a year. So people were challenging if it was true or not. No, that's not true. That's fake news. It's not true. We still have to pay. Of course, it was already free, but it was easier to have that kind of news then. After 7 years, and I come back, and in 2025, there was 7 years of this law already. So we found We found 7 years of people who have graduated, 7 years who actually went through the free college program. And so after so long, we have millions of young Filipinos who are now saying that law was real. And I was a beneficiary of this law. And we found that that law, which of course is implemented all across the country, was able to show a proof of concept that we weren't lying when we said we would make college free, we would make education more accessible, and that these young Filipinos became our campaigners in their areas. And unlike in the 2022 presidential elections, where a lot of young people tried to convince their parents to vote for their candidate, now they were successful. In 2022, because it's a vote for one, it's very difficult to convince their parents to vote for their choice. But because the Senate is a choose 12, a lot of these parents were willing to listen to their children and to put me and Senator Pangilinan in. So we were the surprise of 2025, and we made it back. And now that we're back, of course, we have this whole agenda for the country, for education. We had, on the first week, we had a 7-point agenda of what we wanted to do for the Education Committee. But within that first week, the biggest political scandal in our country crops up. I'm sure you've been hearing about it. I'm sure you've been looking at it. I'm sure you've seen it already in your feeds. But right now, you've come to the best time in our country. No, just kidding. You've come to a country in transition. That's how I will position it. You're coming to a country in transition. Now, why is it in transition? What we found, or basically what the President spoke about during the State of the Nation in July, uncovered the biggest political scandal in our country since the 80s. And we've uncovered, through hearings, investigations, and through citizens' from citizens' own participation, we've uncovered billions and billions and billions of pesos worth of corruption that has been going on for the last few years. And it's rocking our country to the core. We're currently having these investigations, charges. As you're here, charges are being filed on more and more individuals. And we've had numerous rallies all across different weeks, different sides, different denominations, all coming out with their rallies asking for better governance in our country. In 2022, my candidate back then ran on a governance platform, on a good governance platform. And a number of people, some who are probably here and our friends also said, "Why are you running on a good governance platform? That's so old-fashioned. Nobody cares." Honestly, the tagline, if translated to English, is honest government. Gobyernong tapat. Honest government. And back in 2022, the powers that we don't want me to speak here, no, just kidding. Back in 2022, people would come up to us and say, "That's so old-fashioned. Nobody cares about good government. People have accepted a certain level of corruption in our country. So don't even talk about governance, But just 3 years later, here we are talking about governance, talking about cleaning up government transactions. And the interesting thing is, this scandal hits Filipinos very, very close to home. In fact, hits us inside our homes. Because the money that should have been spent for flood control was basically pocketed by politicians and government contractors. And because of climate change, many of you whom are also focused on the environment, we know that extreme weather condition has become more and more extreme as the years go by. And now the flooding hits our streets, hits our homes, and honestly hurts and kills our citizens. And the rainy season in the Philippines is from July all the way to December. So from July up to next month, we will constantly be reminded of the corruption that has happened in our country. And it's not just Metro Manila, it's Metro Manila, North Luzon, South Luzon, Bicol area, the Visayas, which of course happened a few weeks ago, and even Mindanao, even in the South. We're constantly reminded of the corruption that has happened in our country. And that's why people want to see changes happen. Now, what's the difference from previous protests and scandals and now? What I find that people are calling for are three things. I'll say it first in Tagalog. Ikulong ang sangkot, ibalik ang pera, baguhin ang sistema. Jail those who are sangkot, who are part of it. There's a better word for it. Jail those who are complicit. Thank you. Jail who are complicit. Return the money. Change the system. The third one's interesting. Because, I've been going to rallies since I was a young boy. Nobody ever said change the system. It will just be jail the complicit, return the money. But interestingly enough, in 2025, the third one comes out also, which is change the system. And what's happening now, and this is why I say, Doris, we're in transition. We're coming up with a new constituency. I don't think our future elections, and this is my fearless forecast for the Filipinos here, our future elections will be about colors anymore or political parties. It won't be green, red, yellow, pink. No longer. I think it will be a constituency who want to see genuine changes in the system and those who want to retain the current system that we have that have led us to this level of corruption. I think it will be a constituency, a taxpayers' constituency, those of us who pay taxes and who want to see our taxes going to the proper places, and those who want to retain a system where your taxes go to pockets of individuals, sometimes in government and sometimes out of government. That, I think, is where we're headed 2.5 years later. By the way, our next election is still 2.5 years away. It's still a long time away. And from now until then, a lot of things are going to happen in the Philippines. But as you can see, I'm always an optimist. And I'm optimistic that as more people wake up to the reality that it's not just about names and faces. It's about systems that need to change for things to really change. And if more people who are elected actually know how to look at systems and be able to change systems, then I think we should transition to a better place. But if we keep on electing people who do not have the capacity to change systems or have no inclination to change systems because they're interested to retain the current system, then we'll be stuck where we are in a perpetual loop of unhappiness, angst, and distrust, which is basically where we are right now, where Filipino citizens are right now. So talking about changing the system, and this is with Ken. So if you see, a lot of the people here, I actually work with them very closely, no? So Ken here is part of the People's Budget Coalition. They're one of our main partners in one of our pet bills. What's our pet bill right now? It's called the Cadena Law, but basically, it will put all government transactions online and then a technological solution to put it on blockchain. If I'm not mistaken, we might be, if this is passed by next year, we might be the first country that will have all of our expenditure documents on blockchain and for everybody to see. We've been trying to pass in the Philippines a freedom of information law for the longest time. We've never been able to pass it. But the freedom of information law basically just says, if I write to my government agency, they have to write me back. So we're taking it a step further, which is all government transactions should be out online already as a matter of law. And the agency itself does not put these documents out to the public, they can be charged initially, administratively, eventually criminally, especially if there are things that they're trying to hide. This is the first time in our country that could happen, which means that not only will the projects, the so-called flood control projects, which are in the hundreds of millions of pesos, will be out to the public for the first time in our history. Even the government contractors who bid for these projects will be out to the public. Even the proponents, the congressmen and the senators who proposed these projects, their names will also be out to the public. And even up to how much the cement was, the price of cement for these government contracts. So that's usually how they hide the kickback when you overprice, no? You make the price of cement higher, you make the price of met the rebars higher, even the price of cement at purchase will also be on the blockchain, out for the public. Now, this law, this bill, which is now under the period of interpolation in the Senate, this would never have had a chance if this scandal wasn't happening. If this scandal wasn't happening, I would have filed this, or I probably wouldn't even have filed it because somebody would have just killed it. But now that a lot of Filipino people are watching, they're engaged, they're really, trying to see. They're every day, they're checking if there's going to be movement. Because a lot of attention is there, because people are actually participating. I don't know who's going to try to block this bill. Because if anybody tries to block this bill, they're not going to answer to me. They're going to answer to the people and the netizens and our youth. So there's opportunity like this during these times of difficulty. And if we can get bills filed, if we can get laws passed that actually contribute to a better system, then I think there's hope for us. And right now, that's the challenge that we have. Now, while we're figuring out this corruption, we're also in the middle of an education crisis. And many here have been working in this space also. I won't go into detail anymore. It's too depressing to go into detail about our education problems. But let me just say that what was supposed to have been allocated for flood control, which because of the investigations, it was uncovered that these are not really distributed properly in the country. That budget is now slashed, and a chunk of it, almost half of it, is now going to education. Almost a fourth of it is going to health. Another fourth of it is going to social services. And again, this probably wouldn't have happened if this scandal didn't happen. So if you ask me what's happening now in our country, and it's happened in different parts of Asia as well, it's painful because there's a lot of conflict, but it's necessary if we want to move forward. Maybe this is the battle scar that I was talking about. It's not just individually, maybe also as a country. We need to go through this scarring process to learn from our mistakes. It's not just the Philippines, but all of our countries, I think, are unfortunate in that we tend to repeat ourselves, and that some of the mistakes we've done in the past, we end up doing it again. But that jolt to the system, I think, is needed to be able to move forward. One of my friends from Batch Zero, Kyrie, who is a Malaysian member of parliament, I saw him recently in a conference in Japan. That conference was for former and current parliamentarians. Okay, and it's interesting because Kyrie and I, our careers have sort of mirrored each other. Okay, I was in the Youth Commission. He was in the Youth Commission. I was in the Senate. He was a member of Parliament. He was out. I was out. And when I saw him, we were both out. He had a beard, and when I lost, I also grew a beard, by the way. So for those of you who lose in politics, it seems to be part of the healing process to grow a beard, right? He had a huge beard. I'm like, what's with your beard? It's like, yeah, I'm a blogger now, I did that too. I said I was on TikTok after I lost. So, and he said something interesting. This is last year before the elections. He said, I think the world changes so quickly. You just need to be two things. You need to be alive and you need to be ready. Okay? And I said, brother, I'm running already I'm filing in October. We met shortly before then. And then I saw him again this year. And I had made it. I said, hey, guess what? I made it. And I think he's planning on running again. And I said, I took what you said to heart. Be alive and be ready. Easier said than done. Be alive and be ready, right? First time I met him, we were both in our 20s in the Youth Commission. We see each other across every 4 or 5 years. And again, last year. And I mentioned that because all throughout my journey, friends from Asia 21 have been there. One of our friends, so I talked about my Yale, time in Yale. I had a fellowship there for 4 months. I applied for that fellowship after the 2022 elections. I was so depressed. After the 2022 elections, I said, I have to get out of here. So I applied for that scholarship, for that fellowship. I was there for 4 months. That's a World Fellows program in Yale. And the person who directed me there is one of our Asia 21 awardees as well, no? Myrish Antonio used to be a counselor in Dumaguete. She eventually ended up as the head of fellowships in Harvard. And when I visited her and we got to chat, she said, you know what, why don't you apply for this fellowship? It's a short-term, mid-career fellowship, might be good for you. And honestly, it was really helpful for me. It helped me heal from the 2022 elections because that was a really difficult elections. I studied blockchain and AI for government transactions there, which now I'm applying. And when I got back from that fellowship, I was decided to run again and to go back to politics. Another Asia Society, Asia 21 member who's been very helpful. Ching, of course, is a good friend. Ching helps me all the time, not just on specific issues, no? But another person who's helped me a lot is Darwin Mariano. I think some of you met Darwin also. Darwin and I met in the National Youth Commission in 2001, 24 years ago. He was the youth head of one of our political parties in the Philippines, Aksyon Demokratiko. And he's still a good friend until now. My business partner in my social enterprise, also one of my closest friends, also became part of Asia Society, him and his wife, and they're very close to Doris as well. And they're people who have supported me through the ups and through the downs. So that's my suggestion. Please take the time to be with each other. The program that Ching and Doris have made is really great. But the best part about this program is really the people that you meet and the friendships that you make. And I hope that, like myself, who have kept friendships for decades after my batch zero of Asia Society, I hope you do the same. And through those ups and downs, through those victories, triumphs, defeats, through all those battle scars, being part of a group that's willing to help is something that is truly priceless. So thank you everyone, maraming salamat, and welcome to our country. Thank you. Maybe if anybody has questions or do you have time? No, do you have time for a few questions? Yes, sir. Go ahead. Go ahead. Maybe we can ask for another mic.
Hello, Senator. My name is Michael. I'm a new fellow from the United Kingdom, and I'm someone that previously considered a political career too. So thank you for sharing your story. I think it's very authentic, very inspiring. You've talked us through some of the highs and lows of your journey so far. My question is, what would you say has been one of the hardest political or leadership decisions you've had to take, and why? Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So I was in the administration. In my first term, I left, I was in the opposition. That's tough. That's really tough to be in the opposition during the Duterte administration. That's really, really very difficult. I mean, you've all read about what happened in our country during that time. But to be in the opposition at that time, you're really in the in the target site of the administration. We had an uprising in the south, in Marawi. That's one of our Islamic cities. And it just so happened that I was there to open up the business center the week before. But because I was there the week before, when it happened, our Department of Justice minister at that time said that I was the one behind it. And he said it publicly, okay? And he said it to the media. So in short, I was a terrorist, okay? I mean, it was that bad. It was that bad. So by the way, this guy was fired by President Duterte. He was too wild even for President Duterte, okay? I mean, that's saying a lot, right? So during that time, and this is 2016, that's a lot of things happening in the world in 2016. We had our elections here, we had the Trump elections, we had so many things happening with Brexit, UK, you're from the UK, right? That's around the same time. Cambridge Analytica, we were the test case for Cambridge Analytica for a number of the campaigns that they ran in that year. So at that time, and people are better off now. I mean, more people now, I think, can distinguish between fake news and not fake news. But at that time, it seemed like everything that was out on the internet, people would just accept, and it was very, very difficult. When I ran in 2019, my father, who is an old-time political, he's been a campaign manager for numerous individuals. He's known in the political circle as one of these gurus. And my dad told me, "Iho, be prepared to lose, because I don't think you're gonna win." And I said, "No, you look at our numbers. We did our math and everything. I think we can make it." And he's like, "No, my reading is that you're not gonna make it. So I suggest don't run and preserve your winning record, you know. But if you're gonna run, be prepared that you're not gonna make it." And I said, if I'm not gonna run, what's gonna happen? Nobody at the time, no incumbent would have run. So going into that and knowing that, there's a chance that you're not gonna make it, it's really hard. And then after that election, I was charged with sedition. So sa mga Pilipino dito, mo, talo ka na nga, chinarge ka pa, di ba? So, how do I say that? It's like, you've already lost and they still charge you, Because it's different when you're charged as a senator. You say, yeah, it's part of the game, right? But when you lose and you're a private citizen, then you're charged. It's difficult, Of course, that case was, by the way, so that case was interesting because they basically said that the opposition met something like this, okay? Met and was planning to overthrow the government, okay? But what it was a school gathering in my alma mater in Ateneo. And they charged the vice president, Lenny Robredo at the time, they charged other candidates, they charged people that were there, and it was an open forum that was live streamed. But they still charged me. And up to today, I asked my friends in the police, why did you charge me? It was an open forum in a school, and they still charged me, And that's cost. You have to have a lawyer, you have to show up at the fiscal. But you know who saved me? It was the sound engineers and the maintenance people. See in the back, the people there in blue, they're the maintenance people. Hello po, ate, yan. And then the sound engineers in the back, those were the people who saved me. And this is during the time of a lot of killings. The sound engineers and the maintenance people in Ateneo, they all signed affidavits saying that we were there and none of that happened. What you're talking about, that there was a plan to overthrow the government, none of that happened. And these are regular Filipinos who stood up for me, I'm getting a little emotional just thinking about it. But it was a different time back then. And they're the ones who were brave enough to say that, no, that what you're saying didn't happen, no? So that was hard. It's really tough. Because it's not just about you. It's about your family, the safety. So that's like the Uber one, because that was an extraordinary time in the Philippines. But now, just putting yourself out there opens you up to a lot of risk. Once you put your face out there, you're open game to everybody. And any Tom, Dick, and Harry can just say something about you, and there will be a set of people who will believe it. And if your stomach isn't strong enough for that, then don't go into politics. If your wife's stomach is not strong enough for that, then don't go into politics. If your parents' stomach aren't strong enough for that, don't go into politics. Because politics these days is all about image, perception, and all of that. No? So whether it's real or not, whether it's a small thing or a big thing, you're going to get attacked and you're going to get criticized. And you have to be ready for that. That's every day. So, Michael, if your stomach is hard enough, and it's not enough to have good intentions, by the way, you have to be built for it because it's tough, especially if you want to do good. More so if you want to do good, honestly. It's really tough. But, I don't think you'd be here if you didn't have tough stomachs, right? So thank you, thank you.
Thank
Yes.
you, thank you. Ay,
Okay.
okay.
More questions. I will answer shortly.
Oh,
Okay.
sige.
I will answer shortly.
Okay, so we will okay, one more question. One. So I know it's such a rare and special opportunity to have Bam here with us, but he'll be here with us until your next 11:30. So you can actually, and he'll be looking around your different groups. Okay. Diba? You said
Joining
you
the
were-
race.
Yeah. Okay. So one more question. Go ahead.
Answer the three very quickly.
Okay.
I'll answer the three quickly.
Quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No long questions. Okay, go.
Okay. Hello, sir. It was really nice hearing from you. I'm Sharmin. I'm part of this batch, and I'm from Bangladesh. And you know what has happened in Bangladesh and what Dr. Mohammad Yunus is trying to do there. But we, coming from a South Asian country, I think we are very used to seeing a corrupt system, corrupt governance and institutions. So I just want to know your experience, maybe very briefly. How was your experience like after all the scandals and everything you have been through? When you again when you again wanted to do the elections, was the system transparent or good enough to host you, or with everything? Was it good enough, or how did you cope with it if the system was corrupt already? So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay.
Second question.
Okay. Yesterday, Maria Ressa spoke about courage, and you two talk about a different set of courage. She talked about truth, and you talk about inclusive systems. In this Asia 21 leadership forum, what could you advise to us? What kind of courage would you encourage for the Asia 21 young leaders?
Sorry. I've been thinking a lot about islands recently, island states. It comes with positives and negatives. Positives often being more trade, negatives, climate change, also different identities. I'd love to hear a bit more how you think about Philippines as an island, a set of islands.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. My question is actually related to the first one. So someone say when the system is corrupt, if you try to get inside, change them, eventually you will be changed by the system. You will get corrupt too. So just like to ask whether you have those moments that you also feel like, okay, maybe I'm becoming them. Thank you.
Okay.
Join the
So let me
band.
answer this first. So the systems that we're part of are corrupt, and they're made for they're not made for transparency. They're meant for secrecy, and they're meant to be manipulated. Correct? People's Budget Coalition. Correct. But you can't go into this thinking that your good intentions will get it done. You have to know how to play the game to be able to get the changes done. So what do I mean? Our push for the blockchain, we're doing it not just purely based on technical know-how. We're doing it with a whole political campaign to make sure that anybody who opposes this will be seen as somebody who is stopping transparency. You know what I mean? And there's politics there. There's a part there that you need to work on social media. You create the atmosphere to be able to have that environment to actually push for this law. And, that's playing politics. So when the system itself, so I always tell my friends, some of the people we're going up against have killed people, have stolen billions of pesos. You can't just go in with good intentions. You have to be shrewd. You have to know how to play the game as well. But you also need to know what your boundaries are. There's an old adage: you don't go to a mud fight with a white shirt, and expect that after that mud fight you still have a white shirt. I mean, you talk to Brian here, even in healthcare, there are so many things in Philippine. Well, it's a basketball term. It's called box out. For those who play basketball, you have to box everybody out to get the reforms that you need. It's a war, And when you're talking about war, there's conventional, there's traditional, non-traditional, there's unconventional, there's guerrilla tactics. All the tactics that you need to do within boundaries of the law and your morals, You have to employ that to be able to get changes happen, at least here in my country. And that's something that a 35-year-old National Youth Commission, fresh from National Youth Commission, fresh from social enterprise, neophyte Senator Bam Aquino 12 years ago wouldn't have told you. But with all of the battle scars, all of the losses, seeing how grave things are, I mean, talk to Brian, what happened in Cebu? How many people passed away in Cebu? Hundreds. Hundreds of people passed away in Cebu because of flooding after spending billions of pesos for flood control. These are the people you're up against. So you have to be able, within boundaries of law and your morals, know how to be able to play this game. Because if you go in there with just your good intentions, nothing's gonna happen. I'm telling you, nothing's gonna happen. If they're shrewd, you have to be shrewder. If they know how to play politics, you need to know how to play politics as well. If they know how to have the right projection in media, you have to have the right projection in media as well. And that's the only way things will get done. You know. So our lady here has like a puzzled face. You wanna come? What's on your mind? Oh. Well, we can chat later. No, we can chat later. Okay, islands. We don't have immigration problems. We don't have border problems. You know, the rest of the world, governments fall, presidents, prime ministers win on migration, on immigration and migration. Islands, we don't really, it's not our problem. Oh, come over, yeah, come here. Honestly, come, want to come to our beaches. Because we're islands, So we don't have that problem or we don't have that issue in the Philippines. But on the flip side, and this is just my opinion, I don't know if the other Filipinos will share the same opinion, we tend to be a little insular. Insular is island, right? No? We tend to be insular about our problems. We recognize there are problems in the world, but because we've survived on our own for so long, we tend to just look at our perspective, our own problems, So, yes, climate change is important, but more so because we're one of the most vulnerable to climate change, not because really we see it as a world problem, So that's the drawback of being from an island, no? But considering that 60% of the world now has problems with immigration and migration, and we don't have any of those problems, it can be an advantage also. Yep. And there was one more.
Okay.
Yes, courage. If you're gonna enter any development work, or I know the Filipinos might not agree, but I will lump politics with development work, okay? So, yes? Okay, yes. Any kind of development work, government or non-government, agriculture, health, education, corruption, public finance, you need to be able in your heart to believe that you can actually change things. Once you don't believe it anymore, that you can change things, change careers already. I think the psychosis of a number of the friends here, and they're all over here, is that we actually believe we can change things. And some of us have, in our own ways. But I've always believed, much like the Sari-Sari store example, if we all group together, all the changes that we do in our own spheres can lead to that bigger change. I think there are people in government who have accepted that they can't really change things anymore, and they're just running in place. They're not really trying to reform anything anymore. If you can, and even if things are difficult, are hard, even if things are against you, or it might mean it might be dangerous to you or your family, if you in your heart believe that you can actually change things, then I think that will pay off eventually. If more Filipinos believe that things could change, I think we would see that change faster. Yeah. It's just that a lot of Filipinos, maybe I'm referring to previous elections, just accepted that this is how things are. Now I think people are pissed off and they don't want to accept that this is how things are. They want to see things change. And if people are feeling that, and we have capable leaders who can actually institute real change, which are systemic and not just a change of names, faces, families, but really real systemic changes, then I think we have a chance. So that's my suggestion, sir.
Yay! Thank you so much, Senator Bam.